Donald Trump just delivered one of the most shocking statements of his presidency. And it's not what you think. While the world watches the brutal war in Ukraine unfold, Trump has done the unthinkable. He's talking about territory that's been fought over for 3.5 years, with countless casualties on both sides, and suggesting there will be some swapping of territories to the betterment of both nations. This isn't just politics, this is a complete betrayal of democratic values and international law. But here's where it gets even more disturbing. Trump's comments came just days before his planned meeting with Vladimir Putin in Alaska.
It's official. President Donald Trump and President Vladimir Putin will be meeting next week, their first in-person meeting since 2019. Confirming on social media, President Trump said the highly anticipated talks would take place on Friday, the 15th of August in Alaska. Interestingly, a meet on U.S. territory, positioning Mr. Trump as the host, holding talks on land that the U.S. purchased from Russia more than a century and a half ago. The announcement came after a meeting between Donald Trump's envoy Steve Witkoff and Vladimir Putin earlier this week, a conversation they described to be constructive. On Friday evening, President Trump indicated that talks will possibly include discussions over territory.
So we're looking at that, but we're actually looking to get some back and some swapping. It's complicated. It's actually nothing easy. It's very complicated, but we're going to get some back. We're going to get some switched. There'll be some swapping of territories.
The president has confirmed on social media that he will meet the Russian leader on Friday, August 15th, their first in-person meeting since the invasion began. This summit follows what Trump calls constructive talks between his envoy and Putin, with discussions already turning to complicated territorial arrangements. The timing isn't coincidental, it's calculated, and the implications are absolutely terrifying for the future of global democracy. To understand how we got to this shocking moment, we need to examine the pattern of Trump's statements and what they reveal about his true allegiances. Throughout the Ukraine war, Trump has consistently avoided directly criticizing Putin while reserving his harshest words for the country that was invaded. This latest press conference just took that disturbing trend to its logical extreme.
Europe wants to see peace. The European leaders want to see peace. President Putin, I believe, wants to see peace, and Zelensky wants to see peace. Now, President Zelensky has to get all of his everything he needs, because he's going to have to get ready to sign something, and I think he is working hard to get that done.
Will Zelensky have to give up territory, Mr. President?
Well, you're looking at territory that's been fought over for 3.5 years with, a lot of Russians have died, a lot of Ukrainians have died. So we're looking at that, but we're actually looking to get some back and some swapping. It's complicated. It's actually nothing easy. It's very complicated, but we're going to get some back. We're going to get some switched. There'll be some swapping of territories.
The president now claims that European leaders, Putin, and even Zelensky all want peace. He mentions that Zelensky needs to prepare to sign something, discussing territory that's been decimated by 3.5 years of brutal fighting. Trump talks about potential territorial swaps and exchanges as if sovereign territory is a commodity to be traded. During the press conference, Trump made his position crystal clear with statements that would make the Kremlin proud. He said he disagrees with what Zelensky has done, very, very severely disagrees. But what exactly has Zelensky done? The Ukrainian president has defended his country against a murderous dictator who invaded sovereign territory, committed war crimes, and attempted genocide. That's what Trump disagrees with. Think about the absurdity of this position for a moment. It's like blaming Pearl Harbor for Japan's sneak attack. It's like blaming Poland for starting World War II. It's victim blaming on a geopolitical scale that defies all logic and moral reasoning. Yet here we have the President of the United States making exactly this argument. Trump went even further, criticizing Zelensky for needing constitutional approval for territorial concessions while having approval to defend his country. This reveals a fundamental misunderstanding or deliberate misrepresentation of how democracy and national sovereignty work. A country doesn't need constitutional approval to defend itself against invasion. That's a basic right under international law. But making peace deals that involve giving up territory, that absolutely requires constitutional processes in any functioning democracy. The timing of these comments is particularly revealing. They come as Trump prepares for his first face-to-face meeting with Putin since the invasion began. European leaders are deeply concerned that Trump is walking into Putin's trap, giving the Russian dictator exactly what he wants: legitimacy, division among Western allies, and pressure on Ukraine to surrender territory. What makes this even more shocking is how dramatically Trump's position has shifted. Just months ago, he was threatening sanctions against Russia and demanding a ceasefire. He gave Putin deadlines and talked tough about consequences. But now, faced with the opportunity to meet Putin in person, Trump has completely reversed course and is essentially parroting Kremlin talking points. The European response has been swift and unified. Leaders from Britain, France, Germany, Poland, and the European Union issued a joint statement reaffirming that Russia alone is responsible for this war. They're rallying behind Ukraine and Zelensky, recognizing that Trump's position threatens the entire foundation of international law and democratic solidarity. Meanwhile, Zelensky has responded with the dignity and resolve that has defined his leadership throughout this crisis.
President Trump announces that he is preparing to meet with Putin in Alaska, very far away from this war that is going on in our land, against our people, which still cannot be ended without us, without Ukraine. The relevant Ukrainian territorial issue is already in the constitution of Ukraine. No one will and cannot retreat from this. Ukrainians will not give their land to the occupier. Ukraine is ready for real solutions that can bring peace.
The Ukrainian president emphasized that the war cannot be ended without Ukraine's involvement. He stated firmly that Ukraine's territorial integrity is in their constitution and non-negotiable, warning that any decisions made without Ukraine are dead solutions that will never work. He firmly rejected any suggestion that Ukraine would give up territory to Russia, declaring that the Ukrainian people will not give their land to the occupier. His constitutional obligations prevent him from making such concessions without proper democratic processes, something that apparently frustrates Trump but should be celebrated by anyone who believes in democratic governance. The strategic implications of Trump's position are staggering. By suggesting territorial swaps for Ukraine, he's essentially giving Putin a free pass for 3 years of brutal aggression, war crimes, and attempts at territorial conquest. He's undermining the entire Western response to Russian aggression and sending a message to dictators worldwide that aggression pays if you can just wait long enough for American leadership to change. This isn't just about Ukraine, it's about the entire post-World War II international order. If the United States starts rewarding victims of aggression with territorial losses rather than supporting them, what message does that send to China regarding Taiwan? What does it tell Iran about its regional ambitions? What does it say to any dictator considering military action against a democratic neighbor? The most disturbing aspect of Trump's comments is how closely they mirror Russian propaganda. The Kremlin has consistently claimed that Ukraine started the war by refusing to surrender to Russian demands. They've argued that Ukraine is the aggressor for fighting back against invasion. Now we have the President of the United States making essentially the same argument. This alignment with Russian talking points isn't accidental. Throughout his political career, Trump has shown an unusual deference to Putin that defies explanation. Even when Putin has directly challenged American interests, interfered in American elections, and threatened American allies, Trump has found ways to excuse or minimize Russian actions while criticizing America's democratic partners. The upcoming Alaska meeting between Trump and Putin now takes on an even more ominous tone.
Is that President Trump will go into a one-on-one meeting with President Putin, like he did, by the way, in Helsinki in 2018, the last time they had a big summit. No staffers in the room, no Russia specialist. His specialist back then, Fiona Hill, was kicked out. And Putin, I've been in meetings with Putin. He is very effective negotiator. He's a very effective twister of history. And he will then make a plea for why Donetsk, Mr. President, has always traditionally been part of Russia. Crimea, part of Russia. Acknowledge and recognize these facts, and then they're going to come out and have a press conference, and President Trump might say that. And that then will tie the hands of President Zelensky and his European allies in actually negotiating.
NATO's Secretary General has warned that Putin will test President Trump during their Alaska meeting, emphasizing that any serious peace negotiations must include Zelensky directly. Putin cannot negotiate Ukraine's fate through Trump alone. It must be at minimum a three-way conversation with heavy European involvement. With Trump already suggesting territorial swaps and criticizing Ukraine for defending itself, Putin knows he's walking into negotiations from a position of strength. He doesn't need to make concessions or acknowledge wrongdoing. The American president has already done half his work for him by shifting blame away from Russia. European allies are right to be terrified about what this meeting might produce.
If Putin is serious, and Putin then has to commit to sit down with Zelensky. He cannot do this through President Trump. In the end, it has to be, as President Trump has stated himself, a three-way conversation at least with the Europeans heavily involved.
Ukraine's greatest fear is that Trump will meet Putin one-on-one without staffers or Russia specialists, where Putin, a very effective negotiator and twister of history, could convince Trump to recognize Russian claims to Ukrainian territories like Donetsk and Crimea. This could tie the hands of President Zelensky and European allies in future negotiations. With Trump already suggesting territorial swaps and blaming Ukraine for defending itself, there's a real risk that any deal emerging from Alaska will essentially reward Russian aggression while punishing Ukrainian resistance. The broader implications extend far beyond this specific conflict. Trump's position represents a fundamental rejection of the principle that democracies should stand together against authoritarian aggression. It suggests that might makes right, that successful invasion should be rewarded, and that victims of aggression bear responsibility for fighting back. This moral inversion has consequences that will echo for generations. If the United States abandons its role as a defender of democratic values and international law, who will fill that vacuum? If America starts siding with aggressors over victims, what happens to the alliance system that has maintained relative peace for decades? The domestic political implications are equally troubling. By adopting Putin's narrative about Ukraine, Trump is essentially asking Americans to accept that our understanding of right and wrong, aggressor and victim, democracy and authoritarianism is fundamentally flawed. He's asking us to believe that the country fighting for its survival is more to blame than the country trying to erase it from the map. This isn't just a foreign policy disagreement, it's a fundamental challenge to American values and moral leadership. When the President of the United States sounds more like a Kremlin spokesperson than a defender of democracy, we've crossed a line that threatens everything America claims to stand for. The Ukrainian people have shown incredible courage and resilience in the face of Russian brutality. They've defended not just their own territory, but the principle that free nations have the right to exist without interference from authoritarian neighbors. They deserve America's support, not America's blame. Zelensky has emerged as one of the great democratic leaders of our time, standing firm against overwhelming odds and refusing to surrender his country's sovereignty for the sake of temporary peace. His response to Trump's criticism, calm, principled, and unwavering, shows the kind of leadership that America once provided to the world. The contrast couldn't be starker. On one side, a democratically elected leader defending his country's constitution and territorial integrity. On the other, an American president criticizing him for doing exactly what any responsible leader should do. The moral clarity that once defined American foreign policy has been replaced by moral confusion that serves only our adversaries' interests. As Trump prepares for his meeting with Putin, the stakes couldn't be higher. Will he continue down this path of victim blaming and moral equivalence? Will he reward Russian aggression with territorial concessions extracted from Ukraine? Will he abandon America's role as a defender of democratic values? The answers to these questions will determine not just the fate of Ukraine, but the future of international order and America's place in the world. If Trump continues to blame victims while excusing aggressors, he won't just be betraying Ukraine, he'll be betraying everything America once stood for. The world is watching, and history will judge. The question now is whether America will stand with democracy and international law, or whether it will side with the dictators and aggressors who seek to destroy both. Trump's shocking comments about Ukraine suggest he's already made his choice, and it's not the choice that serves American interests or American values. This isn't just about foreign policy, it's about who we are as a nation and what we're willing to stand for. The Ukrainian people are fighting for the same democratic principles that America was founded on. By suggesting territorial swaps for Putin's war, Trump isn't just abandoning an ally, he's abandoning the very ideals that once made America a beacon of hope for oppressed people everywhere.